8:29 a.m. exactly South African time. We cross over once again to the UK, and we're going to be talking with Dr. Maha Azzam. Sorry, but that connection was bad. We've had to reconnect with you. Dr. Azzam, are you there? Assalamu alaikum. Welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you for having me on.
I'm sorry that we can't have this as a video, as a Zoom interview, but there seems to be a problem with connectivity. But let's get to the heart of the matter. We understand that Egypt currently stands in the midst of an unprecedented economic crisis, one that could ultimately lead to Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's doom. We do know that he was elected president in a 2014 election, which a lot of people, call it a sham election. And they also say that he presided over unprecedented human rights abuses, completed the elimination of Egyptian political opposition, and laid the legal groundwork for autocratic rule. Would that be a fair enough summary of the situation?
I think what we face in Egypt is all of what you have described, that it is in reality one of the worst dictatorships that Egypt has experienced. And Egypt has experienced one dictatorship after the other for decades. Throughout the 20th century, after 1952, right through till today. That Sisi's dictatorship is one in which Egyptians have suffered not only economically, and the economic situation is dire today because of the level of corruption, because of mismanagement, but also an authoritarian regime that has not allowed any political space whatsoever. We have near 100,000 people languishing in prison for no other crime than that they spoke out, that they defended the democratic process in Egypt that started after the Arab Spring of 2011 with the first free and fair elections in Egypt in 2012. What we saw was a military coup in 2013 under Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. And the Egyptians have paid a very high price for that coup. It was essentially a military takeover of a nascent democracy that only lasted 1 year under the late Dr. Mohammed Morsi, who was the first civilian president of Egypt. Egyptians today are suffering because there is no rule of law and no respect for human rights, and the economic situation is extremely dire. 60% of Egyptians live on or under the poverty line.
So, Dr. Maha, Mohammed Morsi is still imprisoned, is he not? He's been imprisoned by Sisi. And we also know that when Sisi took power, he tried to wipe out all forms of opposition, but undoubtedly there must be a groundswell of some form of a freedom party. There is a lot of agitation for change, is there not? Are we going to be seeing a second Arab Spring in that part of the world?
President Morsi and the rightful government of Egypt, many of its members, the Speaker of Parliament, were imprisoned wrongly. Many innocent people died in prison because they were not allowed medication. President Morsi died in the courtroom and under very suspicious circumstances.
Oh, of course.
The regime still stands responsible for his death. He was denied medical care. He was denied visits. He was in solitary confinement, and he died in the courtroom and was not given the medical assistance required. He died under not only suspicious grounds, but through torture, because torture, according to the UN, is denial of medication. We don't even know he may have been poisoned. There has never been an independent investigation. Members of parliament have died in prison. Journalists have died in prison. Innocent men and women have died in prison. Egypt is one of the highest executioners in the world. It's there at the top of the list. And to answer your question about whether we're going to have a second Arab Spring, the reality is that the conditions on the ground in Egypt and throughout the Arab world are dire for the vast majority of people. They are not even the same as they were in 2011 or as when Tunis also stood up and rejected dictatorship. They are worse for the majority of people. And therefore, all the ingredients are there for opposing dictatorship that keeps these societies under military or other forms of control and containment. And one must ask the question, why are the tanks ready to roll against the peoples of the region? It must be because it is a minority in power that finds it difficult to remain in power except through the power of the gun and through the power of the tank. Sooner or later, people will rise again. There is an element of fear involved in the fact that they remain quiet, and also an element of desperation because they are going hungry and the economic situation is very bad, so they can hardly lift their heads.
Very sad situation indeed, and thank you indeed for reminding me that Mohammed Morsi died under very suspicious circumstances. And of course, this happened a short while ago. It now comes to mind, so thank you for that, and a very, very sad situation indeed. You also have indicated that it seems not only Egypt, but very many countries in the Middle East seem to be under very firm military rule. Having said that, we're also hearing that Egypt has become a bigger state, and there are talks that there's a possibility. I think he's had the talks already. Morsi, not Morsi, I beg your pardon. Sisi has already been having talks with the Arabs, with Saudi Arabia and the UAE about selling the Suez Canal. People are not happy about that at all. And do you think that that is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back?
I think in reality, Sisi is desperate. He is selling whatever he can. He wants investments through any means possible. He has borrowed and borrowed and borrowed from different sources, the Gulf states and others. Egypt is in severe debt, and future generations will be unable to pay back that huge debt. So really, what will break the camel's back is that eventually Egyptians will realize, and I think they're in full realization even now, that essentially the system has failed. It has failed politically. It has failed to improve Egypt economically. And although there is much talk that the military represents itself as the guardian of the state, that essentially the military has weakened the Egyptian state and has not been able to deliver to the Egyptian people. However much help he gets from the Gulf, whatever he sells, be it the Suez Canal or any other resources that Egypt has, national resources that Egypt has, the reality is the level of corruption at the highest echelons, from Sisi downwards and those who support him, have been so endemic that ultimately any kind of help to Egypt is not going to work. There needs to be serious restructuring. The military controls a vast part of the economy. It has a stranglehold on the economy, and that's why the IMF itself has said that the military needs to withdraw from control of the economy. But even that's not going to work, because ultimately the military relies on this corruption to keep the generals happy, and also an elite of businessmen want to come in and do the same and exploit the Egyptian people. We need a new system, a restructuring of the system where there is an accountability of those in power, accountability of those in business, and the rule of law, which is absent in Egypt today.
Okay, final two questions. You have indicated that IMF is also refusing any further loans. We know that Egypt is indebted to the Middle East, IMF, and a whole host of other Western countries as well, to the tune of billions and billions and billions of dollars, which obviously they're not going to be able to repay. The worrying trend is, why is it that Sisi can't reform Egypt's military-driven economy? And also, you spoke about national assets of Egypt. Isn't there a worry? He's already talking about the Suez Canal being sold. I'm thinking about all of the other absolutely precious, valuable, you can't even put a price on the artifacts of Egypt, that he might go that route. What needs to be done to stop this man and the military from absolutely, Egypt's already on its knees, to decimate it completely and totally?
In reality, the sale of a nation's assets are an issue of national pride. But let us, even if we put that aside, even if we say that for some, they may say it is in the interests of Egypt economically, it is very clear, as I've mentioned, that the issues are structural, that whatever he sells, at the end of the day, it's in order to try to fill the coffers very quickly and to try to ensure that the machine keeps on moving, but at the same time, he cannot survive without the level of corruption that exists in Egypt, because he's got to keep the generals happy, he's got to keep an elite happy, and he does not think that there isn't going to be enough money to actually build the hospitals and the schools and the housing that is necessary for the poor with the system, because it is ultimately one of the most corrupt systems in the Arab world. It's a system that has survived on corruption for decades and decades. And I think the political system in Egypt is on its last leg. But the shame of it is that when it goes, it crumbles, and also the price that's going to be paid is very high. But Egyptians know full well that if they continue supporting or allowing this regime to survive, the things can only get worse. We've seen this since the coup of 2013. The economic system, the economic situation has worsened. The Egyptians have become poorer, and it is not just about the crisis that is faced by many countries after the Russian-Ukraine war. What is happening in Egypt is beyond that. It was happening before the war, and it continues to happen because of many other endemic problems that the regime itself is responsible for.
A very shameful and sad situation indeed. Dr. Maha Azzam, head of the Egyptian Revolutionary Council based in the UK, thank you indeed for your insights on this situation. Worrying indeed, because obviously once you have an uprising in Egypt, there is going to be ripple effects all around the Middle East, and the impact will be felt all around the world. As we know, we're
Thank
now
you.
living in a global community, and if I catch a cold here, or if I sneeze here, the rest of the world catches the cold. Thank you indeed for your insights. Lovely talking with you. Go well.
Thank you very much for inviting me on. Thank you.
It is exactly 8:44 a.m. News and views right here on Salam Media. Our next guest is the person of the year, none other than Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman, Gift of the Givers founder. So do stay with us.